Remove and replace parts. HP Z2 Mini G1i Workstation Desktop PC. How to replace the access panel. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Removal. Slide the release latch down, then slide the panel toward the rear of the computer. Lift the panel off the computer and remove. Replacement. Position the panel on top of the computer, aligning it with the chassis. Slide the panel toward the front of the computer until it is fully seated. How to replace the fan. Tools for the task: Phillips screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the access panel. Removal. Loosen the two captive Phillips screws that secure the fan to the computer. Lift the fan straight up so you can access the cable connector. Disconnect the fan cable from the system board connector. Remove the fan. Replacement. Place the fan into position. Reconnect the fan cable to the system board connector. Lower the fan straight down into its mounting position. Tighten the two captive Phillips screws to secure the fan to the computer. How to replace the riser assembly. Tools for the task: Phillips screwdriver and a Torx screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the access panel. Removal. Loosen the captive Phillips screw that secures the riser assembly. Lift at the two locations marked in blue to release the riser assembly from the computer. To remove the expansion board from the riser assembly, remove the 4 Torx screws that secure the board to the riser assembly. Remove the board from the assembly. Replacement. Position the expansion board in the riser assembly. Replace the 4 Torx screws that secure the board to the riser assembly. Align the riser assembly with its connector in the computer and press down to seat it fully. Tighten the captive Phillips screw to secure the riser assembly to the computer. How to replace the SSD. Tools for the task: Phillips screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the access panel and the riser assembly. Removal. Remove the Phillips screw that secures the solid-state drive assembly. Pull the drive assembly from the system board connector and remove. Replacement. Align the solid-state drive assembly with the system board connector. Insert the drive assembly into the connector until it is fully seated. Replace the Phillips screw that secures the drive assembly. How to replace the memory modules. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel and the fan. Removal. Remove the cover from the memory modules. Press outward on the 2 latches on each side of the memory module, and then pull the module out of the socket and remove. Avoid touching the gold pins on the memory module. Doing so may damage the memory. Replacement. Match the notch on the module with the tab on the memory socket. Slide the new module into the socket at approximately a 30-degree angle, then press the module down so that the latches lock it in place. Replace the memory module cover. How to replace the heatsink. Tools for the task: Torx screwdriver and thermal grease. Before you begin, remove the access panel and the fan. Removal. In the order indicated on the heatsink, loosen the 4 captive Torx screws. Lift the heatsink out of the computer and remove. Thoroughly clean the thermal material from the surfaces of the heatsink and the system board components each time the heatsink is removed. Replacement. Place a small amount of thermal grease on the processor shield. Position the heatsink over the processor, aligning it with the screw holes. In the order indicated on the heatsink, tighten the 4 captive Torx screws until secure. How to replace the processor. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel, fan, and the heatsink. Removal. Pull the locking lever away from the processor, then rotate the lever to its fully open position. Raise and rotate the processor retainer to its fully open position. Carefully lift the processor from the socket and remove. Replacement. Carefully place the processor in position. Position the processor so that the marking on the corner, usually a triangle or an arrow, matches the corresponding marking on the socket. Lower the processor retainer. Lower the locking lever to secure the processor. How to replace the wireless LAN module. Tools for the task: Phillips screwdriver and tweezers. Before you begin, remove the access panel and the riser assembly. Removal. Remove the plastic antenna connector cover. Disconnect the antenna cables from the module. Use caution to not damage the cables. A damaged cable can degrade performance. Remove the Phillips screw that secures the module to the computer. Remove the wireless LAN module. Replacement. Insert the wireless LAN module into the system board connector. Replace the Phillips screw that secures the module. Connect the antennas to the module. Use caution to not damage the cables. A damaged cable can degrade performance. Replace the plastic shield that covers the antennas. How to replace the antennas. Tools for the task: Phillips screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the access panel, fan, heatsink, and the riser assembly. Removal. Squeeze the tabs on the sides on the antenna cover and then pull the cover off the rear of the computer. Remove the Phillips screw that secures the antenna on the rear of the computer. Remove the cable from the clips in the inside front and right sides of the computer. Pull the antenna away from the rear of the computer and then pull the cable out through the hole in the computer. Remove the Phillips screw that secures the internal antenna. Remove the internal antenna. Replacement. Thread the antenna cable through the hole in the rear of the computer and position the antenna at the rear of the computer. Route the cable into the clips on the inside front and right sides of the computer. Replace the Phillips screw that secures the rear antenna. Press the antenna cover into position over the antenna until it snaps into place. Place the internal antenna into position inside the computer. Replace the Phillips screw that secures the internal antenna. How to replace the battery. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel and the riser assembly. Removal. Disconnect the battery cable from the system board connector. Pull the battery from the computer and remove. Replacement. Position the battery in the computer and press it into place until it is secured by the power button tab. Reconnect the battery cable to the system board connector. How to replace the power button. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel, battery, and the riser assembly. Removal. Disconnect the power button cable from the system board connector. Release the tab on the top of the power button assembly. Remove the assembly from the computer. Replacement. Place the power button assembly into position in the computer. Press it until the top tab locks the assembly into place. Reconnect the power button cable to the system board connector. How to replace the speaker. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel, riser assembly, antenna 1, battery, and power button. Removal. Disconnect the speaker cable from the system board connector. Pull the speaker away from the chassis and remove it. Replacement. Place the speaker into position and press it into place. Reconnect the speaker cable to the system board connector. How to replace the Flex I/O module. Tools for the task: Phillips screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the access panel, heatsink, and the fan. Removal. Remove the 2 Phillips screws that secure the module to the back of the system board. Lift the module to disconnect it from the connector and remove. Replacement. Align the module with the connector on the system board and lower it into place. Press down on the module until it is fully seated. Replace the 2 Phillips screws that secure the module to the back of the system board. How to replace the system board. Tools for the task: Torx screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the access panel, fan, heatsink, processor, memory modules, riser assembly, SSD, wireless LAN module, battery, power button, and speaker. Removal. Remove the Torx screw that secures the USB bracket. Remove the bracket. Remove the 4 Torx screws that secure the system board to the computer. Remove the 2 hex standoffs that secure the system board to the computer. Pull up and at the same time, slide the board to the right so that the board is removed from the I/O holes in the side of the computer. Lift the side of the system board and then remove it from the computer. Replacement. Position the system board in the computer and lower it into place. Slide the board to the left so that the connectors align with the I/O holes in the side of the computer. Install the 2 hex standoffs that secure the system board. Replace the 4 Torx screws that secure the system board. Place the USB bracket into position. Replace the Torx screw that secures the bracket.